Hello students, in today's video we'll cover the fourth chapter from First Flight, that is from the diary of Anne Frank, written by Anne Frank. Students, before starting the chapter, I'll give you a brief introduction about the chapter or Anne Frank. Who was Anne Frank? Anne Frank was born on 12th June 1929 and died in 1945. She was a German-born Jewish girl, and she wrote a diary while hiding with her family and four friends in Amsterdam during the German occupation of the Netherlands in Second World War. As the Nazis came to power in Germany, she along with her family moved to Amsterdam but got trapped when the Nazis occupied Netherlands. The Jewish population was being persecuted, and so the family went into hiding in July 1942 in Anne's father Otto Frank's office building. So where did they hide from Nazis? They went to Amsterdam, and along with their family and four friends, she hid in her father's Otto Frank's office building. They remained in hiding for 2 years, and they remained in the same building for 2 years. Then they were shifted to a concentration camp where Annie died due to typhus within days of her sister, Margaret Frank. Their father Otto was the only survivor of the group. After the war ended, he returned to Amsterdam and found Annie's diary. He got it published under the name The Diary of a Young Girl. So after the end of Second World War, Annie's father went to Amsterdam, and there he found Annie's diary, and then he got it published under the name of The Diary of a Young Girl. And the diary was a gift of Annie on her 13th birthday, and it gives a detailed account of her life from 12th June 1942 until the final entry of 1st August 1944. The diary was originally written in Dutch language, and it became one of the world's most widely read books. Many films, television, theatrical productions, and an opera have been based on the diary Anne Frank. Anne Frank has become one of the most famous and talked about Holocaust victims. So student, this was an introduction about Anne Frank. Where did she write the diary and how her diary got published. So student, this chapter 4 from the diary of Anne Frank is an extract from her autobiography. Now students, I'll explain you the second part of the chapter. Saturday 20th June 1942, dearest Kitty. So on 20th June 1942, Annie begins writing diary, addressing it as her friend Kitty. Dearest Kitty, our entire class is quaking in its booth. So what is she writing in her diary? That her entire class was quaking in boots. Quaking in boots means they were shaking with fear and nervousness. Why were they shaking with fear and nervousness? Because the reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which the teachers decide who will move up to the next form and who will be kept back. So why were they the entire class was nervousing? Because they were nervousing about the forthcoming meeting, in which meeting it will be decided who will go for the next grade. Form means next grade, and who will be kept back. Half of the class is making bets, and half of the class they were betting with each other. GN and I laugh ourselves silly at two boys behind us, and GN may be one of her friend. She and GN, they were laughing themselves and making fun of the two boys behind them. CN and Jacques, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. And CN the initial name of any student, and Jacques, who had staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. From morning to night, it's you are going to pass. No, I am not. Yes, you are. No, I am not. So how the children were keeping bet? They all were saying, you would pass, not I am. You would pass, not I am. Yes, you were. Even GS pleading glances and my angry outbursts can't calm them down. So somebody named GS requesting with a quick look and looking at the children, and Annie also shouting on the children, but they were unable to control the children and make them calm. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. Then she is saying to her friend, if she would have asked her, then there were so many dummies. Dummies means the number of students, that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. But teachers are the most unpredictable creature on earth. On the other side, she is saying that the about the teacher that they are unpredictable creatures. Sometimes they change their behavior. We can't believe what kind of result they give and how do they react. I'm not so worried about my girlfriends and myself. Now here Annie is saying that she was not worried about her girlfriends and herself will make it, that she was sure that she would be pass. The only subject I'm not sure about is math, and like the other children she was also not sure about her math subject. Anyway, all we can do is wait. So anyways, they all could do only wait. Until then we keep telling each other not to lose heart, and they until then they were consoling to each other that no need to lose the heart. They were consoling to each other. I get along pretty well with my teachers, and she had a good relationship with the with her all teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women, and the number of teachers were 9 and 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages. And Mr. Keesing, the old fogey means old fashioned teacher who used to teach her maths, was annoyed with her for many times. But I talked so much because she was very talkative, and due to this her maths teacher was very annoyed with her since long back. After several warnings, he assigned me extra homework. So her maths teacher gave her several warnings, she then he assigned her some extra homework as a punishment. And what was that punishment? An essay on the subject, a chatterbox. As Annie keep on chatting every time, so here she had to write an essay on chatterbox. Chatterbox means talkative. A chatterbox, what can you write about that? And she was quite puzzled. How could anyone write on the topic chatterbox? I had worried about that. Later I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag, and tried to be quiet. So she had worried about that. Later she decided. She jotted down means note down quickly down the title in her notebook and tucked it in my bag and tried to keep quiet and keep it inside her bag, and she tried to be quiet. That evening, after I had finished the rest of my homework, the note about the essay caught my eye. So that evening, after finished her rest of her homework, she noticed the note about the essay on chatterbox. I began thinking about the subject while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. And she began thinking, and while thinking, she was chewing the tip of her fountain pen. Generally, students they chewing their pen. It signifies that she is in deep thinking. Anyone can ramble on. Sorry, anyone could ramble and leave big space between the words. So, what do you mean by ramble here? Talk or write aimlessly for long. Now she's saying anyone could write ramble and leave a big space between the words. Means anybody can write useless things and leave the lines between the words. But the trick was to come up with a convincing argument to prove the necessity of talking. But if she would write in such a trick that it would come with such a convincing argument that prove the necessity of just useless talking. I thought, and suddenly I had an idea. She continuously thought, and finally or suddenly she had an idea. I wrote the pages Mr. Kissing had assigned me and was satisfied. And she wrote down 3 pages that had been assigned by Mr. Kissing and he was satisfied. I argued that talking is a student's trait. And what she argued in that essay? That talking is a student's trait. Trait means quality. And that I would do my best to keep it under control. And that she was doing best under control. But that I would never be able to cure myself of the habit since my mother talked as much as I did, if not more. But she was not able to cure herself because she is as talkative like her mother, since her mother as was also very talkative, as I did. If not more, then I that there isn't not much you can do about your inherited traits. Then she is saying you cannot do much about the inherited traits that you get from your parents. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at my arguments. So, after reading her arguments on the topic chatterbox, Mr. Keesing had a good laugh. But when I proceeded to talk my way through the next lesson, but when she didn't stop herself while talking in the next lesson, he assigned me a second essay and he became annoyed. Mr. Kissing, her maths teacher, became annoyed and he assigned her a second essay. This time it was supposed to be on an incorrigible chatterbox, and this time she had to write an essay on an incorrigible means unable to change, difficult to change chatterbox. I handed it in and she handed it. Mr. Keesing had nothing to complain about for 2 whole lessons, and Mr. Keesing didn't complain about for 2 whole lessons. However, during the third lesson, he had finally had enough. Annie Frank has, as punished for talking in the class, write an essay untitled Quack, 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 said Mr. Chatterbox. Since to school, Mr. Kissing was not complain anything to Annie, but during the third lesson, he became too annoyed, he lost his patience, and he gave Annie Frank a punishment, write an essay on Quack, 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 sad Mr. Chatterbox. So now she had to write one more essay on the topic Quack, 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 sad Mistress Chatterbox. The class roared. I had to laugh too. When she had got scolded by her maths teacher this class third time, the class started laughing. She also pretended to laugh, though I had nearly exhausted my ingenuity on the topic of chatterbox. Ingenuity means originality, or we can say skills. And she had nearly exhausted with her originality or the skills on the topic of chatterbox. She ran out of the thoughts on the topic chatterbox. It was a time to come up with something else. Then she thought that now she had to come up with the new ideas, something original. My friend Sani, who was good at poetry, offered to help me write the essay from beginning to end in verse. So she had a good friend. She had a friend Sani. She was good in poetry, and she offered her help and suggested her to that time she must write the essay in a poetry form. I jumped for joy, and she was very excited and was very happy. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on me, and Now she is saying that Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke him by making on on her with this ridiculous subject. Now she is saying Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on her, making fun of her by giving her ridiculous. Ridiculous means very funny topic like chatterbox subject. But I had make sure the joke was on him, as math teacher was very annoyed with her, and always he was giving her punishment, and he wanted to make her ashamed. But she also decided that sure the joke was on him, on her maths teacher, and she was perfectly ready to reply him. I finished my poem and it was beautiful. She finished her poem and it was very beautiful. She wrote the poem in a beautiful story. It was about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 baby ducklings. And this poem, in a form of a story, it was about a mother duck, a father swan with 3 baby ducklings who were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. The father swan killed the duckling by biting because the duckling were quacking too much because they had the inherited quality of mother duck. So father was irritated by this quacking sound and father killed the duckling. Luckily Mr. Keesing took the joke the right way, and this way Annie wanted to convey the message to his math teacher, and she also inherited the inherited traits from her mother of talkative. This Mr. Keesing took her the joke right way, and Mr. Keesing took the joke in a right way. He didn't annoyed after reading the poem. He read the poem to the class. He read the poem in the class to the class, adding his own comments, and he gave the remarkable comments on it, and to several other classes as well. Instead of reading in the same class, he read that poem in other classes as well. Since I have been allowed to talk and haven't been assigned any extra homework, and since then she had been allowed to talk during the class, and she didn't get any extra homework as punishment. On the contrary, Mr. Keesing always making jokes these days. On the other hand, instead of being annoyed, Mr. Keesing always making jokes those days. So student, this was the explanation of the chapter from the diary of a young girl.